Today we are talking about genre clarity for nonfiction authors of memoir, autobiography, Christian living, and truth-inspired fiction. Genre can make or break a manuscript, not because of weak writing, but unclear reader expectations. In this Abundance Books training series, Editor-in-Chief Teresa Janzen shows authors how modern genres work, what they promise readers, and how structure and voice signal the right fit. The result? Clearer positioning, fewer editorial surprises, and books that confidently meet reader expectations.
Welcome, everybody, to Speaking Buddies. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're actually recording Speaking Buddies because Teresa is going to be giving us a teaching today on genres. Now, we all know what they are. If you're like me, though, maybe you have trouble classifying what book goes into what category. And when I submitted my genres to her, she came back to me and she said, "Really, Jen?" I'm like, "I don't know." So I'm so thankful that she does know what she's doing and that she can speak this knowledge into us. And all right, take it away, Teresa.
Well, welcome. I'm Teresa Janzen. I am the editor-in-chief at Abundance Books. Thank you, Jen, for inviting me into this time today. And thank you all for allowing me to disrupt your regularly scheduled program to do this little teaching on genre clarity for authors. Well, I do want to start by saying why I'm doing this teaching. And it's because in my role as editor-in-chief at Abundance Books, I'm involved across the full life cycle of a book after it's been acquired. So from the editorial planning through the manuscript review, developmental editing, production, and marketing. And more than once in that process, an acquisitions editor and the author have told me very clearly and in good faith the genre of the book. They'll say, "This is a memoir." Yet, when the final manuscript arrives, oftentimes months later, what I actually have is a Christian living book or some undefined hybrid of Christian living and memoir or something else. This rarely comes from confusion on the part of the author. It actually comes from a place of care. Authors want to help their readers and they want meaning to be clear. So my hope today is to bring clarity early so that expectations are aligned before the manuscript reaches manuscript review or developmental edit. So I want to start by saying that no genre is superior to another, but they're all have to be uniquely positioned in the market. Problems arise only when the genre named early does not match the book that's delivered later. Clarity protects authors, editors, and the readers alike. Genre affects acquisitions positioning. It affects manuscript review expectations, developmental editing focus, and it definitely impacts marketing. Late discovery of genre misalignment often results in a much larger and longer revision. And not because the book is weak and the writing is poor, but because it has changed categories from what we expected it to be. Memoir, autobiography, and Christian living often draw from lived experience. And because they're so similar in a lot of ways, this is where the confusion can come in. Memoir and autobiography fall under the creative nonfiction category. And actually, a lot of Christian living today does as well, as the reader's expectations for a good story has heightened. Factually grounded writing that uses those storytelling techniques such as scene, dialogue, pacing, and emotional arc, those are narrative nonfiction or creative nonfiction is what we call that. The shared goal is not documentation alone, but a story well told. A memoir is not a full life account. It's a theme-driven story, and that's what makes it a little bit unique. Memoir selects a particular experience or experiences and arranges them around a central question, struggle, or transformation. Chronology serves meaning, not the other way around, if that makes sense. Chronology serves meaning, not the other way around. For example, an author writes about walking through a season of burnout. She shows the long hours, the physical exhaustion, the strained relationships, and the moment she realizes she can't keep going. She doesn't tell the reader what burnout means or how to fix it. She lets the reader feel it and recognize themselves in it. That's a memoir because meaning lives in the experience. The reader draws the lesson without being told. The chapter ends with narrative resolution, not instruction. In memoir, the reader learns because they recognize themselves, not because we explain ourselves. While memoir is about the author, it is written for the reader. Meaning is implicit. Readers discover lessons as they walk alongside the story. Now, autobiography takes a broader view, often covering a life or a major portion of it. It is often chronological or structured, and it accounts for development over time. Reflection is present, yet often inside the story itself. Instruction remains secondary. Meaning emerges from the arc of lived experience. Imagine that an author traces her life from childhood through adulthood, showing how early family patterns shaped her leadership style. She reflects on mistakes, growth, and maturity over time. The insight comes from seeing the whole arc, not a single moment. We know this is autobiography because there is a broad life scope, a chronological or structured progression, and reflection is present, but the book doesn't pause to teach the reader. Autobiography teaches by accumulation, by letting the reader see who you become over time. Autobiography differs from memoir in both scope and in structure. Now, Christian living books operate on a different contract with the reader. Here, the author serves primarily as a guide. Personal stories illustrate teaching rather than stand alone. Lessons are named, applications are offered, and readers are guided toward change. An example of this would be when an author introduces a chapter on trust with a personal story. She then explains what trust is, why it matters, and how the reader can practice it. The chapter ends oftentimes with reflection questions or a prayer, and we recognize this as Christian living because the story supports the teaching. The lesson is named and applied, and the reader is guided toward action. Remember, Christian living writing makes a different promise to the reader. Reflection questions, takeaways, prayers, and action steps are signals that this book is a Christian living title. Now, many authors drift unintentionally because they fear the reader may miss the point. Teaching is added to story, summaries appear at chapter ends, and structure shifts. This comes from care, but it changes the book. Sometimes we see the author begins writing a memoir about grief. The early chapters are story-driven. Midway through the book, chapters start ending with, "What I learned about grief is," or "Here are 3 things you can do," or "Take a moment to reflect." Those types of statements shift the book from a memoir to Christian living. The author didn't change their heart, they changed the structure. The book quietly shifted genres. This is rarely a conscious decision, but it is usually a compassionate one, and it has consequences. Readers buy books based on promises communicated through genre, description, and placement. Memoir readers seek immersion. Christian living readers seek guidance. When expectations are mismatched, even strong writing can struggle in the marketplace. Authors writing memoir or autobiography may still want readers to reflect deeply. This can be accomplished through companion reader guides, book club resources, lead magnets, or downloadable PDFs without altering the book's genre. So if an author writes a memoir but wants book clubs to engage more deeply, instead of adding questions to the chapters, she could create a downloadable discussion guide. The book remains memoir. The reader still gets support, and the marketing may actually be improved. Sometimes the best editorial design and decision is about where something lives, not whether it should exist. Now, some stories resist nonfiction constraints or may be more easily told or read in a fictionalized context. Fiction inspired by true events allows composite characters, compressed timelines, and narrative freedom. Readers expect emotional truth rather than strict factual precision. It's about how the it's about emotional truth, not the facts. For example, if an author's real life story involves multiple people, long timelines, and sensitive details, she may want to create composite characters and reshape events into a single narrative arc. We know this is fiction inspired by true events when we see emotional truth that matters more than exact detail. The reader expects story, not documentation, and the author gains creative freedom as a result. This isn't hiding the truth, it's choosing the right container for it. Now, let me say a little bit about hybrids. Hybrids are legitimate and increasingly common, but they are more complex, not less. A hybrid is not an accidental overlap. It is strongly designed intentionally. It has a dominant genre. It has consistent structure and clear reader orientation. Because hybrids present unique editorial and marketing challenges, we will address them separately in depth in a different teaching. For now, do not let a hybrid emerge accidentally. That's really the main takeaway. Most of the time, authors should write within one clear genre. I do want to pause here and offer an important clarification. For many authors, the idea of a hybrid feels immediately appealing. It sounds flexible. It sounds expansive. It can feel like permission to not leave anything out and to make yourself exceptionally clear to your reader. But a hybrid should not be your first inclination. In most cases, the strongest books are not the most complex ones. They are the clearest ones. Think of it this way. Clarity comes first, mastery comes next, and complexity comes later. Hybrid work lives in the culmination of these things. Hybrid does not simplify the writing. It adds to it. Hybrid books are harder to structure, harder to edit, and definitely harder to market. They require more discipline, not less. That's why at Abundance Books, we encourage authors to begin by asking whether a single genre can do the job well before assuming a hybrid is necessary. Here's the clarifying question I want you to sit with. What problem does a hybrid solve that a single genre cannot? And really sit with that when you're writing your book. What problem does a hybrid solve that a single genre cannot? If the answer is, well, I don't want to leave anything out, or I want to make sure they get the point. And oftentimes this is the case because we've experienced such transformation. We want other people to experience it too, and we just want to make sure they get it. Well, that's not a hybrid problem. It's actually either a clarity problem or a mastery challenge. Every genre requires discernment. What belongs inside the frame and what does not. Memoir requires that discipline. Autobiography requires it. Christian living requires it, and fiction does too. Hybrid becomes appropriate only when you can clearly articulate why a single genre would limit the reader's understanding or experience in that. So a single genre would limit the reader's understanding or experience in a way that matters. That's when a hybrid becomes appropriate. So if you feel drawn to a hybrid, don't rush there. Start by executing one genre well, because even if you end up writing a hybrid book, you have to have a main genre. So start there. If after doing that work, you still see a clear need for a hybrid structure, that's a conversation worth having with your editor, and one we'll address in a dedicated teaching. For now, I want you to hear this clearly, please. Hybrid is not a shortcut. It's an advanced design choice. Do not let a hybrid emerge accidentally. Most of the time, authors should write within one clear genre. As you plan or revise, ask yourself these questions. What do I want this book to do for the reader? Am I inviting discovery or am I guiding application? Where does meaning live? How do chapters end? And where would this book be shelved today? And that last question is actually what makes a hybrid so complex and so difficult to market, is because your bookstore owners, your librarians, they all have to pick a shelf to put your book on. And if they cannot clearly identify where the book belongs, they may disregard it altogether. So memoir and autobiography invite readers to walk with you and discover lessons along the way. Memoirs are thematic and cover a specific period of time, whereas autobiographies are structured and generally have a broader scope. Christian living invites readers to learn through direct guidance. And fiction inspired by true events invites readers to experience truth through story. All of these forms are valuable. The key is choosing intentionally and early. So writing, editing, and marketing all move in the same direction, and this will help serve your reader well. Now, I've created a downloadable checklist to help you consider the genre your book naturally aligns with. It will also give you the next steps to follow if you want to consider a hybrid genre. You'll find this resource with the replay of this session. That's it. I hope that was helpful. I will stop and take some questions now. Denise, go ahead and unmute.
I do have a question between the memoir and the autobiography. My initial genre is a memoir, but it does span a period of time. Mm-hmm. So is that okay?
Well, that's a really good distinction. So memoirs are going to span a period of time. A little bit of it is the scope of the time, but the big question is the theme. Are you addressing one kind of specific theme? What is the felt need that you want your readers to experience the transformation in? Is it an arc or a progression, or is it really more thematic? Does that make sense?
It does, because it's definitely more thematic. It all revolves around this one situation, and so it progresses through that.
Yeah, then you are clearly in a memoir.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Teresa, can you give an example of a hybrid book that Abundance has published?
Well, Jen's book is actually a bit of a hybrid. I know you just said you just read it. Do you see that in her story?
It's got, some of the personal stories in there, but it also has some incredible lessons, not only that she's learned, but lessons that can be passed on to other readers.
Right.
I was mesmerized by it when I was reading it. I'm like, wow. That's all I kept saying. Wow, I didn't know she went through that. Wow, what can I learn through this? And who can I share this book with?
Right. But she has a lot of guided teaching in there, as well as a lot of story. And so that's what makes it a clear hybrid.
Okay, very good.
Between Christian living and memoir.
Very good. Thank you.
And that is actually where a lot of people do want to go, is a hybrid between memoir and Christian living, because of that whole thing where we've experienced this incredible transformation. And we want other people, we want to make sure they get it. So we want to just keep giving them that point. But, and at the same time, that the marketing is very different between a Christian living book and a memoir. And if we are structured in a way that forces us to put the book into Christian living, it's actually a very full market right now. Now, not always, just right now at this period of time, there are a lot of Christian living books out there, and it becomes more difficult to market that book. And people at the same time would like a nice memoir or fiction inspired by true story. That's the other area that they like a good story. Everyone likes a good story. Other questions?
No, I think I learned something. I write nonfiction, so I'm not sure that I will have to deal with some of these issues, but still, it's interesting to learn.
Well, this is all of it's nonfiction, except for that last category of fiction based on a true story. That one is fiction. And so when you're writing, yours is clearly either, you could call it academic, or you could call it very clearly Christian living. But people still, in this day and age, expect a good story to be in there. That's what really connects the teaching to the explanation to the application is connected through story. So you will.
I have another quick question. In terms of a memoir, is there more of a preference whether it's written in a present tense or a past tense? How do you juggle between the back and forth?
Yeah, good question. So memoirs are written in first person for sure. And you want the story to travel with the reader. I like to keep it present,
If I'm doing a developmental edit on somebody's book and it's past tense, I will ask them to revert it to present tense, because I find a lot of times when you write in past tense, you're actually telling, you're not showing. And just by simply putting it in present tense, you would be surprised at how quickly you start to show. Teresa, you would be so proud of me. I actually had to say to somebody, that is way too much showing. And that person is here today.
Sometimes we call that, sometimes it's on point writing, where you become so descriptive and into the minutia of what's going on. Occasionally that is really helpful, but most of the time it can be too much. It slows things down too much. It's a tool to use when you want to slow the story down. You don't need to drag it down.
One thing that I am encouraging some of the people that are at the beginning of their writing process and they want to write their memoir, I encourage them to write it as a fiction story. When we write it as a fiction story, we have some creative liberties that we can take. As well, we can also change location, we had better change locations and change names and stuff like that. But it cuts down on the need to get permission from other people to write out your story. And it opens up the reader to dig into a story and some good biblical teaching without being taught. That makes sense, and Teresa's like, right now, the market is inundated with Christian living and the self-help, all that kind of stuff. People are tired of it. People want an escape from reality, but they still want a good story. So when we have a great story and we can write it in a fiction way, that is a remarkable feat to be able to do. And it will really enhance your writing.
And memoir is helpful because it gives people the impression that they're not alone in what they've experienced, and yet it should still employ those same good storytelling technique like a fiction would. Things like dialogue and scene and stuff like that you would definitely find in a fiction book is in a memoir. But some of those hard stories, I agree with Jen that it's sometimes easier or better. Not necessarily easier, because writing fiction is a different craft, but it's oftentimes better to do it as fiction and a little bit safer too.
Teresa, I have a quick question about fiction genres and how important is it to stay within like a specific, I'm writing what I like to call transformational fiction, and the book that I'm working on right now wants so badly to be a romance. And, hybridizing some of these genres, crossing lines, is that more okay in fiction?
Yeah, so fiction is really a playground of hybridization in the modern world. And there's a really good book called The Anatomy of Genre, and it's all about the fiction genres. And it begins with one of the very first stories that was really a hybridization of genres was Star Wars. And because you can see several different genres in that, right? When you do it effectively, it can be really good. You just have to make sure that you have a main genre, you're hitting all the key points of your main genre, and you're bringing other things in intentionally to add to the interest of the story. One of the things that can happen with fiction is that it can become quite predictable, and twisting your genre helps to keep things a little bit unpredictable for your reader and make it a little more fun. It's a great playground.
Thanks.
That book, Anatomy of Genre, it's a thick one too, by the way. I don't think it's really meant to be read cover to cover. Anything else?
Also put out there that we also have the Devoted Pen app that will also help you in your writing, taking your past tense and turning it into a present tense and help you with verbs, adverbs, all kinds of stuff.
Where do
And
we
so
find that?
it is www.devotedpen.com. And it is $1.99 a month or $39.99 forever.
Forever access.
Wow.
And that includes all of the updates too. Ken is constantly working on updates as new people see the app and engage with the app and say, hey, I love this. Could you add this feature? And he comes home and he adds that feature. So it's an amazing tool, and take advantage of it.
All right, awesome. Well, I really look forward to receiving lots of wonderful manuscripts and knowing clearly what they are. And put that downloadable guide checklist, just walks you through some questions to help you clearly identify exactly where your book is ending up. And it's a good reminder as you continue to write to make sure you don't drift accidentally.
Thank you so much. This was
Hey.
really helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
it's good.
you.
Thanks.
Thank
It's
you,
very good. Thank
Teresa.
you so much, Teresa.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.